I'm speaking to you today from Vancouver, where I'm on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I am delighted to be joined from Beijing, where it's early tomorrow morning, by Ambassador Barton, who previously had a long and distinguished career with McKinsey, where he served 3 terms as Global Managing Partner. Ambassador Barton, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Maybe we could start by looking back over last year. 2020 was a year none of us could have imagined. The COVID-19 pandemic started to be felt across Asia in late January 2020. Some 2 months before it was felt in North America, it quickly led to shutdowns and the suspension of travel, which severely impacted businesses across the region and also international education. What's it been like in the region over the last year, and what does recovery look like?
Well, thank you, Paul. It's wonderful to see you again, and I'm really excited to be able to speak to the whole group. Well, what I just say up front, one of the things that I think we should be most proud of in Canada is our higher education institutions and education broadly. And I can't think of reinforcing that more in today's time. So I just wanted to say that up front. It's been the recovery has been very quick in China, is what I would say. Since May of last year, it's basically been operating at about 90% of normal. There are still outbreaks that occur. For just yesterday, an outbreak was 12 cases, that would be in one part of the country. And there is a massive response to that when that occurs. Usually that everyone gets tested. You probably have, 2 million people tested as a result of 12 cases. There'll be a lockdown of that particular area. So it's been a very disciplined approach that way. But as a result, the economy's been domestically pretty much back to normal. In fact, if we look at holidays that have occurred, Tomb Sweeping Day or the May 1st holiday, especially in the May 1st holiday, it was, there were 3% more travelers traveling in total than there were in 2019. Not obviously way more than last year, but everything is sort of on that shift. But there's a paranoia, and it's not just amongst the government, it's amongst the people, if you will. People are very, very kind of disciplined about it. So it's, in a sense, back to normal domestically, very difficult to go in and out of the country.
And as we look to the sort of the recovery, do you see that as being a sort of a swift recovery? I mean, my sense in Asia has been you get these sort of slowdowns and with the pent-up demand to get back to normal, my sense is we're going to see a very rapid recovery. Do you think that's the way it will play out?
I do, Paul. I think you picked at one other point I think we should always remember here is that you've got this underlying growth in demand in the region and the whole sort of Asia Pacific region because of this growing middle class, this urbanization, which is nowhere near run its course. And that is just like a conveyor belt of building a middle class, moving people from rural areas to cities. Their 14th five-year plan, they just released a couple of months ago, a new target. We're going to go from 60.6% urbanized to 65%. And those are massive numbers when you see it. So that's there. It's an underlying force, as you said. And then you've got, an economy that they want the domestic economy to hum and move. And you're seeing that in other parts of the region as well. And so there will be these outbreaks. They will occur. I think we haven't certainly figured everything out about COVID yet. Just when we think it's done, Taiwan has recently had a resurgence of cases, even though it had been seen as a case of, everything was fine. Singapore has been going, it's been fine, and then it's up. They had to cancel that recently. So we should never take it for granted. But the underlying drive of force is very much there. And as soon as there's, any level of stability, it just comes roaring back. And we're seeing that in all the numbers, the consumer numbers, we're seeing it in the industrial numbers. It's across the board.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting time, and I think we're going to see it, as you say, right across the region. There's a number of economies there that will accelerate and accelerate fast. Maybe just switching gears a little bit, and I'd like to maybe focus on international education. It's a big driver for us. Just to sort of give that a little bit of context, 2018, as you well know, international students in Canada contributed approximately 21.6 billion to Canada's GDP and supported almost 170,000 jobs. It's a very significant economic contributor. And in BC alone, I think it was 1.7 billion of the province's GDP is from international education, which represents about the fifth largest contributor to the provincial economy. These are very, very significant numbers. And I look at that and I look at the region, and as we look at international education, I really feel we cannot lose sight of the global economic power shift over the last couple of decades. You have spoken on many occasions where I've been with you when you've talked about the world's economic center of gravity shifting back to Asia. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and the growing middle class in China and the opportunities it will provide for universities, colleges, and business in Canada.
It's a huge opportunity. That's the headline. I think you all probably you know that and you're seeing it, but it should continue, and that's why for us in the mission in China, education is one of our highest priorities because of its economic importance, but I argue even more importantly from its people-to-people ties importance. It's so important to us. And as you said, we have in Canada about 140,000 Chinese students in terms of, if I could call it a stock. That's not a very nice way to talk about people, but a stock. And then we have a flow of about 30,000 coming in. And we focus on that very carefully because there's a very high appreciation for Canadian standard education. Paul, we've talked about this before. I've lived in China. I have more of a maybe you start seeing things now that you are looking for, if you will, in the sense of, okay, if education's that important, what happened? You see so many schools here actually that are on, for example, the New Brunswick education system or taking the BC curriculum. They not only is it there an appetite to go to Canada, which is wonderful to be educated, there's also a desire to import the Canadian education standards and system here. That's the degree that is the level of which it's held, and that has not that sort of appetite has not changed even when we've had we're in the midst of these very significant bilateral tensions. The people are speaking, if you will. They want their children to be educated in Canada, and they want access to that system. And I think it's very, very important that we shift also our resources and mindset to where the center of the world is moving and has moved, and it already is here now, and it's going to continue to accelerate. And I think we're a bit behind, honestly, on as a country in recognizing that from a resource allocation. And it's not blaming government or blaming, it's all of us have to understand the shift that has occurred, and that we, Canada, have a very important role to play. We are liked, but if we don't show up, we're not that relevant. So it's incumbent on us to do this.
That shift, Ambassador Barton, that shift that went from where it sort of its epicenter was, I think it was wherever it was in Afghanistan or somewhere, and it moved. That timeline I find is extraordinary. I don't know if you want to just maybe even just talk a little bit about that and the trajectory that has taken.
Yeah, it basically that if you look over a 2,000-year period, right? The center of gravity used to be somewhere, I think it's north of Kabul was where it was. If you sort of took the Earth and on a GDP basis tried to balance it, it was around Kabul, and it had gone in. It had taken basically 2,000 years to go to Iceland because you had the America, mainly the U.S. economy rising, also Europe, but the American economy went to basically Iceland. It took 2,000 years, and it's taken 50 years basically to go back to where it was 2,000 years ago. Obviously, the size of the economy is much, much bigger now too. So the speed and scale of this shift, I think, is it's breathtaking. I mean, even now, having lived here before, and I lived here for 6 years in China, and I would come back regularly. I'm now sort of obviously living here again. I'm still stunned with the changes that are underway on the innovation front. It's obviously, there's a lot of geopolitics. It's a tougher environment. That is, I didn't expect that back then. Maybe I should have probably, but it's we have a more assertive, authoritative Chinese leadership. You've got ASEAN, that is now a very significant economic region in its own, and the relationship between China and ASEAN. So there's a bunch of dynamics going on, but the fundamentals of the power shift, they have occurred. It's no longer in 10 years or in 5 years. It's now. It's happened, and COVID, in a sense, has accelerated it because of the recovery that we talked about at the very beginning. The recovery has been, in general, much faster with the Asian economies, right? There are differences. I mean, Japan's had some challenges. No one's had a smooth path. But if you look at Vietnam, China, Singapore, and you look at just the growth rates and kind of the committed capital and investment that's going in, the innovation, it's kind of going back to the trend line of where it was in 2019.
So, I mean, it's an interesting lead, and I mean, you're obviously very well familiar with the Canadian institutions. I mean, you're a graduate of UBC. You've got a number of honorary doctorates. I'm pleased to say one from BCIT as well as from U of T. But also you are Chancellor of University of Waterloo. When you look at those different types of institutions and you look at what's actually happening in this sort of growing middle class, where do you perceive the real value propositions for Canada in its educational delivery and its relationships with China and Southeast Asia?
Again, I think it's number one, it's very large. And again, as I said, therefore we're eating our own soup here in the mission. It's one of our key priorities that we have for Canada. We've got 5 key sector priorities. Education is one of them, and that's one I'm very passionate about and that we push. So it's large, and I think the dimensions of it are, one, clearly there are a lot of Chinese and Asian students that want to come to Canada for their higher education. Also for, to do IB, grade 10 to 12, to get into the educational system, the private school system. It's a broad range. They want their children there. And you see that with the numbers, right? We've seen it with China, and I believe India is now the largest. Obviously, there'll be some challenges with COVID and so forth, but we've got to, again, look at the trend line that will be back. So a very large part of interest of parents in these countries to have their children educated. It's like I was talking to about the Maslowian hierarchy of needs. What I feel in China is you don't start with nutrition or food at the start. You start with education, then it's food. That's how deeply ingrained it is. And then you've got our country that is so well regarded on our educational standards and how we've done it. I mean, Paul, just before the session, I was looking at the list of people that you all have in this group, just the size and scale. It makes me proud. I mean, it's a lot of institutions that are there that are world class, and that's wonderful. And I think we punch above our weight in it, but we've got to make sure we continue to do that. So people want to come to Canada, and by the way, it's not. I think you're going to see some changes in that. I hope that will continue and increase on what we're already seeing. You're going to see more of an interest in lifelong education. People wanting to do 6-week courses, 12-week courses, 4-week courses. You're going to see people, regulators in different environments out here. They're going to want that education from Canada and to have the experience of being in Canada. So I think there'll be new segments, if I could say, that will be coming into the system. There's obviously the English language training. So there's that sort of more segments of flow of people coming into Canada. And I would really push the thinking on that, because those are very large opportunities, I believe. But we're also going to see people trying to import the standards and way we do it over here. And I think we should be perfectly comfortable with that, as long as we're compensated properly as a country for what we've invested. But we should do it. There's an appetite, and not everyone can send their children to Canada. We probably can't absorb everyone that would want to come, but that why? So we have to think about it with the flow going the other way. And then there's the whole internet related education, which again is booming. And again, the standards that Canada holds for our educational institutions, those standards, I think, in developing new online versions of education, whether it be tutoring, special courses, lifelong learning, and so forth, we also should be looking at. The venture capital going into education here in China is incredible. It's just the innovation that is going on, and the size of that market. And by the way, that's also the case for Korea. South Korea is the case for Thailand. It's the case for Indonesia. These are Vietnam as well. I don't have the numbers for Vietnam, but I'm sure it's there. So there's lots of opportunity, but we have to be here. Mm-hmm. We have to show up. We have to talk about it. And then I think there's a lot of opportunity.
It's interesting. I look back on a comment that Dave Johnson made when he was Governor General in Canada, and he talked about the importance of Canadian international education and referenced the notion of educational diplomacy, which I think goes beyond just the economic element of this. It's more than just the fact that it's a big contributor to GDP. It's an interesting concept, and I'm curious. What do you think of a statement like that? And what does a statement like that mean to you, and what should it mean to us in Canada?
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I admire David Johnson greatly. And actually, as a diplomatically, I think that is one of our most powerful tools, if I will. I sort of see the people that have gone to Canada for education are back in their country, they're ambassadors for Canada, and we need to tap into them better. This is where the alumni, I'd be interested in with the group, how you're thinking about that, how we leverage that asset. And again, forgive me for calling people assets and stocks. You know what I'm getting at, but that's a incredible asset for us. The large number of people that are in country here that have been educated, and I think we should tap into that. And I'll give you one anecdote, if I may, Paul, just on it. In September of 2019, when I came into the role, it was extremely frosty. I mean, no one wanted to meet me. Canada was kind of like, just don't go there. The sort of doorman in the hotels, if you had your Canadian flag, would kind of move a couple of meters away from you, type of thing. There was a real sense of that. And so one of our economic counselors wanted to have an event in the residence for financial services, leaders in Beijing. And I was going, "Are you crazy? Like, no one will. This is going to be embarrassing. No one will show up. We can host 100 people and 3 people." I said, "I'm thin-skinned now. I can't take this kind of. No one wants to meet. No one wants. Like, why do you want to do it?" He goes, "No, we just got to keep doing this. We've got to continue." And I said, "Okay, well, we'll do it." I was nervous. Cut a long story short, it was packed. It was totally packed. Because we invited a lot of people. Everyone came. And what we found, I actually talked about it in the remarks. I said, "This is so kind of people actually to come. We know you're taking a risk coming in here, just given the bilateral." You know what it was? The vast majority of those people had been educated in Canada. And they were in senior roles. These were not like people that were entry level. These were senior people in the China Investment Corporation, in CCB, one of the major banks. I can go through it. They were educated in Canada, and they felt loyal to Canada. It makes me more. They were, and someone would say, I was born in China, but I was married in Canada. And by married, they say married because that's where I got my higher education. So there's this loyalty, and do not underestimate the power. That was like whack in the head to me to go, wow, that is a force. And it was emotional. So that's there. And I don't think we recognize it as much as we should. I mean, John Stackhouse has got one of his books out there about the sort of the 11th province, I think he sort of calls it, of Canadians that are outside. He also refers to it, and I think we should spend even more time on the people who've had some education in Canada that in a way have fallen in love with Canada because of that experience, and they feel it, but we've got to tap them. It's a huge untapped resource power for us that we should do. And that's why I'm keen on this people to people ties, we have to continue to push it and make it easier for people to be able to come in, have that experience. Our best way of selling our proposition, if you will, is for people to come and see it and be a little bit part of it in the system. So sorry, I could go on about that, but it's very powerful.
I think it is extraordinary. I think it's extraordinarily important, and I know we're up against the clock here, so it's we could go on and talk for hours on some of these things, and we have on many occasions in the past. And I sincerely look forward to doing it again in person at some point. But just one very quick final piece here before we wrap up. My sense is we're going to see increased pressure on funding for education domestically. I think the impact that the pandemic and the economic impact on that, it's going to become increasingly important that we mobilize private sector support for education. And the US has been doing this for a number of years, and they've done it very successfully. We have started to see a change in landscape in Canada. With these tremendous levels of support from people like John McCullough, who I know is a good friend of yours, who contributed $200 million to McGill. How do you think that we as a community have got to start to rethink the way we engage with the private sector and I guess with individuals and corporations?
Well, maybe I'd say a couple of things on that, Paul. I think one, as a huge beneficiary of the education system. I mean, I wouldn't have any opportunities I have today if it wasn't for the education system. Fundamentally, that's why I'm deeply passionate about it. It's very personal, and that's because it was available. It wasn't unaffordable to me. It was because of the way we have been able to fund it and do it. It allowed people like myself to be able to do it. So I feel very proud of the fact that it's a system that tries to include everyone in being in it. If I might put my hat on as a chancellor of a university, I think it is important, though, that we are able to, ensure that our educational institutions have the endowment and the support that's required for the long term. And I think it's very important that alumni are being able to give money back to the university, that we think all of us have to think about our funding. And I think this COVID crisis is, the Laurentian situation was a bit of an eye-opener for me in where it is. We have to every organization has to be resilient. So we need to be thinking about that and how we ensure that we've got that funding. And I think tapping more into alumni to be able to do it. I think the John McCullough gift is he's not only done that in a very significant way here in Canada at McGill, but also at Oxford. He's really the second century founder of the Rhodes Trust. He sort of came in when that endowment had dropped. And I think having, people like that, entrepreneurs putting money into the education system, I think is a really important part. I think part of this too is we have to remind Canadians who aren't linked to the education system, maybe in their day-to-day role, but remind them of the importance of it. They probably wouldn't be doing what they're doing if it wasn't for the system. And I can tell you, it is highly regarded outside of Canada. We may, as users of the system, not recognize that, but we should. So I think there has to be more of a collective sense too, that this is an important asset for us and I think our educational institutions are going to have to do more and different, and there's changes that are occurring. There's lifelong learning, modularization. There's a lot of things that go on that front. But I don't want to get into all the intricate details of the funding. That's not my knowledge or capacity, but I would just say we have to think about resilience, because there'll be ups and downs. We have to think about all sources of funding that one could get if in your university. What is that? And I think that, I think it's important people are giving back. I find the John McCullough McBain thing is it's a lighthouse thing. And we don't, he's a billionaire. That's great. It's a lot, but every one of us can do something. And if it's $50, that's great. I'm not trying to, so I think we have to think about that. And as also, I think as Canadians, I think just appreciate the importance of that and of our system and where it is. And it doesn't happen by luck.
Ambassador Barton, this has been a real pleasure. And on behalf of the Canadian Council for Advancement of Education, thank you for making the time available. I know your schedule is extraordinarily busy. And also thank you for your commitment to public service in Canada. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Dominic. This has been just wonderful. Thank you very, very much.